Hey folks, John here, Old Hickory Forge. Welcome back. If it's your first time here, welcome. So, what's going on today? I'm down here in the workshop putting the finishing touches on a couple of kitchen knives. I'll show you what we got. These are both W2 full flat grind, differentially hardened. Got some pretty sweet handle material. This is box elder burl with blue resin, black micarta pins. This one here, same deal, W2, differentially hardened. This is dark oak burl, I think, with red resin and copper pins. But neither one of these is sharpened yet. And I've been getting a lot of requests lately to do a video on how it is I actually sharpen my knives. And it's somewhat more complicated of a subject than you may think, so I've done up a couple of little drawings. We're going to talk about some tools and I'll walk you through it. So if you want to check it out, stick around. So this isn't necessarily going to be a how-to sharpen a knife, strictly speaking. It's really going to be more how I do it. If you've been around the channel, you've seen me sharpen plenty of blades. I use my 2x72 grinder over here. Now, I've made hundreds of knives, so for me it's second nature. But if you don't have a solid grasp of edge geometry, if you're not familiar with the machine, it's very easy to quickly overheat your edge or to take too much material. You know, something you've spent hours, days, or weeks working on can be destroyed in a matter of seconds trying to sharpen it on a big grinder if you don't know exactly what you're doing. So starting out, a good option is something like this. This is a work sharp knife and tool sharpener I got when I first got into knife making. This was how I did all my edges, and it worked great. Normally there's a little guide that snaps onto here that tells you exactly what angle you're sharpening at. I just lost it. But basically while it's running, you would sit your knife in here, follow the guide, and pull it through. And you will get perfect, repeatable edges every single time using this. The only downside is the guide can mar up the surface finish of the blade, but you know, that's neither here nor there. But starting out as a beginner, that's something I would consider a must-have tool. So now we're going to talk about geometry a little bit. What we got here is an example of a full flat grind. There's all kinds of different grinds out there, but the principle is pretty much the same in most cases, not all. But generally speaking, you'll have a primary bevel that comes down to a flat spot where your cutting edge is going to be. When you're done finish grinding your knife and it's ready to be sharpened, this is what you got. So what you do is you tilt the knife to a different angle. About 20 degrees or so is usually a good choice. And then you create a secondary bevel. Basically, you'll have two more flat bevels that come to a point, and that's what actually becomes your cutting edge. The reason you don't just want to follow this angle all the way down until you have a sharp edge and do what's called a zero grind in most cases is because that edge is going to have very, very little durability. If you watch the green beetle video I talked about, he actually does that, and something even like cutting paper chews the edge of the knife up really bad because there's just no material backing up that sharp point. So over here, we got kind of a close-up of what it is I'm talking about. Same thing, flat primary bevel, flat secondary bevel. On a lot of factory knives, this is what you get because they have machines that do it all in one go. But if you're trying to do this by hand, let's say you come at it from 20 degrees here and 22 degrees or what have you here. If you have any deviation in the angle, you're going to have spots that hang up on that cutting edge. So what you do is you go to the slack of the belt and you create what's called an apple seed edge or a secondary convex. And these are better for a few reasons. You have that same fine point, but you have ever so slightly more material backing it up, kind of like on an axe. So this edge is going to have a lot more durability. It's going to be a lot easier to create, and it's going to be a lot easier to maintain because it's going to hold much better. So on high-end cutlery, an apple seed edge or a secondary convex is almost always what you see. And the work sharp is great for that because the belt has just that tiniest bit of give. And these always cut better because using the slack of the belt, you have just the tiniest bit of leeway and blending everything together. So say if you accidentally did come at it from 20 degrees here and 22 degrees here, all that's going to get blended together real nice and smooth. So this is what we're trying to create. So when you get ready to cut your secondary bevel on, you want to start with a good sharp low grit belt. This is a 40 grit belt. Always do it with your edge facing down. And like I said, I've made hundreds of knives, so I kind of just know what 20 degrees is supposed to look like. So about like that or so. And basically just pull the knife across. What you're trying to create outright is that flat secondary bevel we talked about. But you know, you want to be quick because, like I said, it is very easy to overheat your edge really quick. So we'll get that done and then we'll keep moving. So after you got your secondary bevel ground in, something along these lines is what you have. It shouldn't take more than a few passes per side with the 40 grit. But what you want to look for, it's very hard to capture on camera, but you see how that burr is starting to form on some places of the edge. You can see it a lot better on this side. Well, what that burr means is those flat secondary bevels are actually meeting each other and creating a point, and the material the belt is removing is kind of sticking to that point. So once you can kind of feel it with your finger, and once you've got that burr going all the way up and down the blade, you're good to move up to the next grit and start slacking everything over. What I got here is a 220 grit belt. This is where we're going to move to the slack and start blending together the flat secondary bevel we just cut on. So we're going to keep the same angle we had before. We're going to let the belt do the work, not pushing very much at all, and basically just knock that burr off of both sides and get all the marks from the 40 grit out and keep moving. So, as you can see, we got a slack 220 grit finish on the secondary bevel, and we still got that same burr all the way up and down the edge, which is good. It's much finer now. It's looking good. So what we're going to do now is go up to an even finer grit belt. We're going to use a dull 800 grit and basically just do the same thing, chase that burr back and forth and improve the surface finish of the cutting edge, and keep moving. So here's what we got off of the 800 grit. You can see much nicer surface finish, still the tiniest bit of burrs. So this is where you want to kind of start checking it for dull spots. Basically run your fingernail all the way up and down the edge of the knife. If you can see or not, but just the weight of the blade alone, it should be able to bite into your fingernail no problem. If you push the burr back and forth all the way up and down the edge, you shouldn't have any spots you need to go back and touch up, but if you do, just go back and touch them up. It's not a big deal. So now what we need to do is take this thing to a leather strop to get it really sharp. So that's what's happening now. So what we got here, this is a 6-inch buffer with what's called a leather strop wheel on it. Basically it's just a wheel made of leather. Now if you don't have one of those, you can use a handheld strop like this, and what you would do is drag the knife over it like this, and what that does is polishes the cutting edge to a very fine finish and removes that burr on a microscopic level. This is really all you should have to do to maintain a knife, is strop it every now and again. You shouldn't have to actually remove material from the cutting edge to sharpen it, but maybe once or twice a year. So if you're going to use one of these, just make sure it's turning away from you, obviously, and every now and then take you some 80 grit sandpaper, rough it up a little bit, because over time the heat from it being used will burnish the leather and harden it up. And then throw you some white compound on there. And then basically just go over each side. That's kind of just the basics on how to sharpen on a 2x72. Basically what you're after, you know, is a good smooth appleseed edge with a high surface finish. And if everything's come together well, you should be able to slice paper with it, no problem at all. So there you go. That's kind of just the basic rundown of edge geometry and how to get good edges on a belt grinder. The paper test isn't really the end-all be-all in terms of sharpness. It's really more of a ballpark. If you watch the Green Beetle video, he actually uses a professional sharpness testing machine and talks a lot more in detail about it. But you know, that's kind of just the boiled down, no nonsense version of how to take from an unfinished blade to a sharp blade. So if you like what you saw, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. There's links to the social media if you want to follow me, links to the Etsy and the Patreon if you want to purchase some of my work or help support the channel. But that's all I got for you. I hope you found the video helpful, and y'all take care.